So this is big game visualization, and this is status update 2. The members of the group are Dominic Rainbow, Finley, Finley, I don't know how you pronounce her.
Finley McElwain.
Irene Steiger and Reed Olson. And I'm going to give just a brief overview of our project, just to remind you of what we're trying to do. So a quick recap. Our group is working with a biologist at West who specializes in migration ecology, and he uses GPS collar data from big game animals to generate reports for his clients. So he does this in an effort to improve their understanding of the impacts on migration of these animals in order to help these people, his clients, with management and mitigation efforts. They end up making decisions to do things like habitat treatments, fence removals, or modifications. So we've been developing a web-based mapping application that allows users to create and upload these GPS collar data sets, and also eventually uploading shape files to the projects that they can display on a map. And this will allow them to be able to perform spatial and temporal queries to visualize the movement of the animals over time through animations. So if you remember, this is sort of a target animation that we had in our first status update. And we'd also like them to be able to create a public instance from a URL so that they could share the visualization with anyone fairly easily. We learned earlier in the semester that West had devoted an internal team to developing a similar visualization project. And so part of our motivation is now to outdo that internal team at West.
So I'll talk a little bit about our technologies. As a reminder, we are approaching this as much as much of a web project as it is a data science project, because one of the key pieces of this application is that it would be accessible centrally to West, and easily accessible, and with distributed functionality and access throughout their organization. So the website of it is nearly as important as the data science piece of it. We're still using Docker for development, and still using all of the technologies that are listed. The priorities for the technological side and the development pieces of this I think are in just about this order for us. Ease and simplicity of use is really important. I think one of the biggest frustrations that we've heard expressed from our main contact at West is just about how hard this process can be for him. Security is obviously super important as well, because this data is proprietary and it belongs to West, and there's a surprising amount of hunters that would like to have access to it. As a final priority, look and feel is pretty important, because we don't want the animations that our tool is generating to look bad, because then that's kind of like the whole point behind it.
So I'm going to talk about the progress that we were at our last update to begin with, just as a reminder. We had the application set up and all the bare bones were in place. Users could register and they could log in, and we had found a way to get Leaflet, which is our software for displaying the map. We had imported that and had that ready to go, and we had managed to upload some data to the site and visualize the data just as singular points on the map, and that was about where we were at the last stage.
We'll talk about our current progress in sort of an interactive way. We'll be doing a demo alongside of the pieces that we are showing here. We have improved our data management in the app. The overall experience for putting data on the application is very much improved. You remember the previous status update, but that component was very raw and quite unfinished. So I'll jump over to the application, and now this is where things are new. We now have this new data file selector. So if I click that, I can drop it down, and I can select a CSV file that is correctly formatted as a set of location observations. So I'll select this 6,000 row sample to keep the time reasonable. And when I open that, it will get staged right there. And you can reopen this and select a different file or remove this from the staged area. And then when I hit upload, we'll see that it pretty much immediately uploads and starts processing. What the processing is doing is generating the post-GIS geographical index so that when we do start doing spatial queries, they will be a lot faster. Once that's done processing, it automatically updates so that we can go over and view it in the map. But that summarizes the data management page.
Yeah, so with the time selection controls, we decided that we would do the selection controls on the front end side. And we figured that allowing the users to sort of set the time they want to start viewing data and the time they want to end the viewing of data was basically good enough for what we imagined people would want. So we have a slider here that lets the users set the start date and the end date. I feel it's pretty intuitive for drag and drop. And then that's essentially how a user would select the range of observations they want to view.
Yeah, so we already discussed how we had completed the displaying of map points kind of statically. And now we've added the ability to animate.
Yeah, as we saw earlier with the slide that Reed was showing, we had an idea of what we wanted our animations to sort of look like to begin with, and we based that on what we were aiming for accomplishing. Begin the animation. This is ultimately what we decided, or what we have so far, I guess, for animations. You can watch each of the different animals as colored separately to make them distinct. And the animation we achieved was pretty reasonable for what we wanted. We are dealing with pretty spaced out data points and observations. And because of that, the animations aren't nearly as quite as smooth as we saw in the example, but we're looking at a lot more spaced out observations over time and a smaller range of travel. So it's going to look a little bit more jagged, but it still does a really solid job of showcasing to the user where the animals have been and where they're going.
We have obviously completed the time queries for visualization. You can select a range and see the animation of the points. This has partial completion because another one of our goals is to be able to query movement spatially. So we want to be able to supply a region in the form of a shapefile and see that overlaid on the map to see any animal movement that has gone through that region. And that is one of our goals as the semester wraps up.
So as Finley kind of mentioned, we want to be able to identify when an animal goes over it, like a shapefile, basically an area on a map that we've designated as important. We want to identify when that's happening, and that's particularly useful for West to narrow down the sort of queries they might be making. So we have shown a pretty small data set, a very small data set actually for the sizes of these things. It's probably 5% of the data there. And to further make it easier for the people at West to use this, quickly identifying only the animals that are being impacted by a region is important. So that's kind of why this is still a goal we'd like to accomplish.
So to summarize the demo of our current progress, we've enhanced the data upload and selection experience. We've added the ability to select ranges to query movement across. Map points are now displayed as animated lines, and you can query through the time selection.
So what we still need to do here, well, first, like we said, we want to add the ability to upload shape files and then add them to the map as an overlay. And then once that's done, we can start working on spatial queries. Keep track of the animals that are going through that particular region. We also want to add a project metadata display on the projects page, make it easier to keep track of the various data that's associated with each project. We want to do some more to extend interactions with the map. We're thinking about adding the option to pick colors for the individual animals. Because at the moment, the color generation is random each time, but it'll make it a lot easier if each animal has its own color and it stays that way no matter what query is generated with it. And we also wanted to optimize the visualization generation, as some of these data sets are pretty large and can possibly crash the browser.
Lessons learned. Difficult to do fast, large-scale data transfer and processing in a web environment. This is definitely true, and we've discovered the size of some of their projects get up to nearly 1 million observations. Deciding how you want that client-server data exchange to happen is very important for the performance of the application, and that's a problem that we're still working to solve correctly. Next very important lesson was that time moves just as fast when, if not faster, when classes are canceled. I think we're all learning that lesson, perhaps in the hard way or maybe just the easy way. As I mentioned, more planning surrounding the client-server data transfer would have been good, just because of some of the issues that we ran into with the browser needing to keep so much data in memory. This, I think, mainly would have been easier to avoid if we had better sample data from West earlier on, so we could have reached out to them, I think, a little earlier to get some of that sample data. And we've all discovered that changing development environments between work and school can be a little bit challenging, especially in this setting when we're all working remote.
So the impacts of COVID-19, Finley mentioned sort of the kind of working at the same desk day after day. And that's really, I think, at least I'm feeling it, and other members of the group have expressed this sort of monotony of just sitting at the same desk, day in, day out. Maybe you can get outside once in a while, but it's just builds this sort of like sense of like one day just blending into another. Another thing is like being stuck at home all of the time. You have a lot of distractions present, like normally you're able to separate your workspace from, I don't know, your entertainment space or your eating space. Then there's also like this issue of economic uncertainty that a lot of us are graduating right now. So it's kind of scary time to be, leaving school and looking for a situation where you're moving on to. So it's a little problematic and a little stressful, I think, for a lot of us. Our team has been using Discord a lot for communication, somewhat, but Discord. And then, of course, we're using Zoom for this presentation. I don't know, these remote communication tools don't necessarily have some of the interpersonal cues that you get working directly with another person. So it's a little different. Takes a little adapting to.
I'm going to talk a bit about the metrics. And as you can see, we are totally confident that we will achieve our MVP. On the other hand, the stretch goals, maybe not so much. But overall, I'd say we're on track. And thank you for listening. We look forward to hearing your comments, feedback. We'll be happy to answer questions.